The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as my uncle's face turned pale at my best man's words. In that instant, the secret he'd guarded for 20 years exploded into the open, tearing apart everything I thought I knew about the man who raised me. The reception tent in Napa Valley glowed under strings of golden lights, while 200 guests froze mid-conversation. My new wife, Sarah, squeezed my hand, but I barely felt it. All I could see was Uncle Michael standing there in his charcoal suit, the one he'd bought specially for today, his shoulders rigid like he was bracing for a blow he'd known was coming his entire life. Chris, my uncle's longtime best friend, stepped forward from the shadow of the oak tree, his jaw tight, and his eyes locked on Michael with a look that suddenly made terrible sense. The best man, Jake, laughed awkwardly into the microphone, still thinking it was just a joke. "Come on, Mike, we all know you're the eternal bachelor, always there for Ryan like a dad, but let's be real, no woman could ever tie you down, right?" A few relatives chuckled politely until Jake added the line that changed everything. "I mean, thank God you're not one of those guys who'd rather play house with another dude and mess up a kid's head." The laughter died instantly. Michael's glass slipped from his fingers. Chris moved without thinking, his hand landing gently on Michael's back in a gesture too intimate for just friends. My mother's sister, Aunt Linda, gasped loud enough for the whole tent to hear. "Michael, is this true?" I felt the ground tilt under my tuxedo shoes. 25 years of memories slammed into me at once. Uncle Michael showing up at my kindergarten graduation when my parents were already gone. Uncle Michael teaching me to throw a baseball in the backyard of our little Seattle house, even though his own hands shook the first time he admitted he was scared of letting me down. Uncle Michael sitting beside my hospital bed after my appendix burst, reading Harry Potter out loud until I fell asleep. He had been my father in every way that mattered. And now this. Michael lifted his chin the way he always did when life tried to knock him flat. His voice came out steady, but I heard the tremor underneath. "Jake, I think you've had enough champagne." But it was too late. Chris's hand stayed on his back, and suddenly the entire room saw what I had never noticed in 2 decades. The way they stood together. The way Michael's eyes softened only when Chris was near. The way Chris had quietly paid for my college books every semester without ever taking credit. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Sarah whispered my name. The DJ killed the music. And in the sudden silence, Michael looked straight at me, the man who had given up everything so I could have a normal life, and said the 4 words that broke my heart. "Ryan, I'm sorry." The drive back to the hotel that night was the longest 30 minutes of my life. Sarah kept the radio low, but neither of us spoke. My mind kept replaying the moment Chris had finally said it out loud for the whole wedding party to hear. "Michael and I have been together for 15 years. He didn't want to hide anymore, but he did it for Ryan. 15 years. While I was busy with high school football and first girlfriends and college applications, my uncle had been in love and terrified to tell me. Back at my childhood home in Seattle the next afternoon, I sat on the same worn couch where Michael used to help me with algebra. The house still smelled like lemon cleaner and the coffee he brewed every morning. I stared at the framed photo on the mantel. Me at 8 years old, missing both front teeth, Michael's arm around my shoulders, a smile the biggest I'd ever seen. That was the year my parents died in the car crash on I-5. Social services wanted to send me to Aunt Linda in Arizona. Michael, who was only 25 himself and fresh out of grad school, fought the court for custody. He told the judge he would raise me like his own son. He kept that promise every single day. I never questioned why he never dated. I never wondered why Chris was always around cooking Sunday dinners, fixing the leaky faucet, driving me to soccer practice. I just thought I was lucky to have 2 cool uncles. God, I'd been so blind. The front door clicked open. Michael stepped inside, still wearing the same suit from yesterday, only now the tie was gone and his eyes were red-rimmed. Chris waited on the porch, giving us space. "Ryan, we need to talk." Michael's voice was hoarse. I stood up, fists clenched. 15 years? You let me call you uncle like some sitcom character while you were living a lie right under my roof. He flinched but didn't look away. I was 25 when your dad died. I had just figured out I was gay 6 months earlier. The world wasn't kind in 2004, especially not in our old neighborhood. I was scared if I told anyone they'd take you away. So I buried it. Then I met Chris, and I fell in love. But you were my priority. You still are. I wanted to scream that he had stolen my right to know the truth. Instead, I heard my own voice crack. You raised me better than my own father ever could have. How am I supposed to feel about that now? Michael took one careful step closer, the same careful step he used when I was little and afraid of thunderstorms. You're supposed to feel whatever you need to feel. I'm not asking for forgiveness today. I'm just asking you to let me explain the rest. Outside, Chris waited in the soft Seattle rain. I watched through the window as Michael turned and offered his partner a small, exhausted smile. The kind of smile I had seen 1,000 times and never understood until now. My chest hurt so much I could barely breathe. The next 3 weeks blurred into a haze of unanswered texts and slammed doors. Sarah tried to mediate, but even she didn't know what to say when I kept replaying Michael's words. I chose you over being open about who I am. How do you thank someone for that and hate them for it at the same time? Chris showed up at her new apartment one Thursday evening carrying a box of my favorite childhood cookies, the ones Michael used to bake at midnight during finals week. He's not eating much, Chris said, quietly handing me the box. I thought maybe you'd want to know. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table the same way we had sat 100 times before, only now the air felt different. Chris told me stories I had never heard. How Michael had cried the night he signed the custody papers because he was terrified he would fail me. How Chris had proposed 3 different times over the years, and Michael always said, "Not until Ryan is ready." How Chris had watched Michael turn down every promotion that would have required travel because he refused to miss a single one of my games. He gave up so much, Chris said, his voice thick. Not because he had to, because he wanted to be the father you deserved. I stared at the cookies, remembering the night. I came home drunk from my senior prom, and Michael had held my head while I puked, never once lecturing me. He had simply wiped my face and said, "We all make mistakes, kid. The important thing is we keep showing up." The next morning, I drove to the house unannounced. Michael was in the backyard, pulling weeds the way he always did when he needed to think. He straightened up when he saw me, dirt streaking his forehead. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he opened his arms the same way he had when I was 7 and lost my first tooth. I walked into them before I could stop myself. We stood there in the sunlight, the same backyard where he taught me to ride a bike. I was scared. I whispered into his shoulder, scared that if I knew the truth, I would lose you somehow. Michael's hand rubbed slow circles on my back the way it had 1,000 times. "You could never lose me, Ryan. Not then. Not now. Not ever." The first family dinner after the wedding was awkward as hell. Aunt Linda kept shooting nervous glances at Chris like he might suddenly sprout horns. My cousin Tyler tried to make jokes that landed like bricks. But Michael sat at the head of the table, the same seat he had occupied since I was a kid, and passed the mashed potatoes with steady hands. Chris sat beside him, their fingers brushing under the table in a gesture so small and so huge it made my throat close. Later that night, Michael and I walked down to the dock behind the house, the same dock where he had taught me to fish. The water lapped softly against the wood. "I need you to understand something," he said. "Being gay didn't make me less of a father. If anything, it made me more careful. I knew the world would be harder for you if people found out, so I worked twice as hard to give you the life your dad would have wanted." I thought about all the times kids at school had called him Mr. Mom and how he had laughed it off. I thought about the college acceptance letter he framed, even though it meant I would move 3 states away. I thought about the empty chair at every parent-teacher night because he was always there filling it. "You sacrificed your happiness for mine," I said. Michael shook his head. "No, I chose my happiness. My happiness was watching you grow into the man you are today." Chris understood that. He waited because he loves me enough to love you too. The words settled inside me like stones finally finding the bottom of a lake. For the first time I saw the full picture. Not a lie, but a lifetime of quiet courage. The real turning point came 6 months later at Chris and Michael's commitment ceremony. They had waited until I was ready. I stood beside Michael as his best man, watching him exchange vows with the man who had stood silently by his side for 15 years. When Chris slid the ring onto Michael's finger, I felt something inside me click into place. Later at the small reception, Sarah leaned against me and whispered, "You okay?" I looked across the room at Michael laughing with his head thrown back while Chris stole a kiss on his cheek. "Yeah," I said. "I'm more than okay." That night, I found Michael alone on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "Thank you," I told him, "for choosing me every single day, even when it hurt." He pulled me into a hug, the kind that still felt like coming home. "Thank you for giving me the chance to be your dad." We stood there shoulder to shoulder, the uncle who became a father and the boy who finally understood what love really costs. A year later, I watched Michael and Chris dance at my daughter's first birthday party. My little girl reached for Papa Mike with chubby hands, and he scooped her up, spinning her until she squealed. Chris caught my eye across the room and gave me the same quiet nod he had given me since I was 15, a nod that said, "We're family no matter what." I thought about the man who had raised me, the man who had hidden the most important part of himself so I could grow up without shame. I thought about the courage it took to finally stand in the light of my wedding and the even greater courage it took to keep loving me through my anger. Looking at them now, laughing with my wife and our baby, I realized something profound. Love isn't about the labels we give it. It's about the choices we make every single day to show up. Michael had shown up for me in every way that mattered. And now I got to show up for him too by calling him Dad in front of the whole world. True or false? A father's love can survive any secret if the truth is finally met with understanding.